All right, let's dive into a truly infamous story. It's back in the spotlight, actually, thanks to
Yeah.
that new Netflix documentary, Trainwreck, Poop Cruise.
Oh, yeah, that one.
We're talking about the shocking incident back in February 2013, the Carnival Triumph.
Hmm.
Over 4,000 people, passengers and crew, just stranded out in the Gulf of Mexico.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, isn't just how bizarre and frankly awful it was.
Right.
It's how this one event, this really difficult situation, wasn't just news. It fundamentally changed an entire industry.
Exactly. So that's our deep dive today. Trying to understand what actually happened, Carnival's initial reaction, which was controversial, and then the big reforms that followed.
Yeah, let's unpack it.
I mean, it sounds like an absolute worst-case scenario, right?
Yeah.
February 10th, 2013, a fire starts down in the engine room.
And that just knocked out the main power for the ship.
Crippled it.
Yeah.
So no air conditioning, no lights in many areas, and, the killer part, no working toilets, no plumbing at all.
Which, on a ship with thousands of people, I mean, you can imagine, raw sewage started backing up, flooding hallways, even cabins.
Grim. They were handing out those red biohazard bags, the kind for medical waste.
For people to use as toilets.
Yeah.
And they just piled up in the corridors.
Yeah. People were desperate, using showers, sinks. One passenger described walking down a hall and hearing this squish, squish sound, knowing what it was.
Ugh. It was genuinely horrific. And it went on for 4 days while they were stranded. Food started running low.
Right.
The heat, you mentioned no AC, it was oppressive. People were dragging mattresses out onto the open decks just to breathe, trying to escape the conditions inside.
Like little makeshift tent cities popping up.
Exactly. And, tensions were high. You heard reports of fights over food, things like that. Just desperation.
And the psychological impact, too, right? I read some passengers reported PTSD afterwards.
Absolutely. That human toll is often understated. It led directly to a class action lawsuit against Carnival Cruise Lines. Many people just couldn't shake the experience.
The images were just awful, plastered everywhere. But okay, so they get sued. Given how bad this looked, how did Carnival initially respond legally? That's where it gets really interesting, I think.
It really does. This was highly controversial. Their initial defense, believe it or not, pointed to a clause buried deep in the fine print of the ticket contract.
What did it say?
Basically, that Carnival made, and I quote, absolutely no guarantee for safe passage, a seaworthy vessel, adequate and wholesome food, and sanitary and safe living conditions.
Wait, seriously? No guarantee for safe passage or sanitary conditions?
Yeah.
How can that even be legal on a ticket?
Well, these kinds of limitation of liability clauses are unfortunately common in contracts. They try to limit the company's responsibility. But this incident threw a huge spotlight on just how vulnerable that can leave you, the consumer. It sparked a massive debate.
I bet. It seems outrageous on its face. But okay, that was the initial argument. They did eventually settle with the passengers, didn't they? They didn't actually rely solely on that clause in the end.
No, they didn't. They ultimately settled. Affected passengers got a full refund for the cruise, plus an extra $500 cash.
Okay.
They also got transportation costs reimbursed and a voucher for a free future cruise. So it was an acknowledgement, financially at least, of how bad it was.
Right. So they settled, but the fact that clause even existed, it exposed a major gap, So the big question is, how did this whole mess actually change things for you, if you're looking at a cruise today?
Profoundly. It really did. The poop cruise, as it became known, was a massive wake-up call. It forced the industry to act.
How so?
Well, Carnival itself poured money into upgrades. Over $500 million across their fleet. Better fire prevention, more backup systems, redundancy, general safety stuff.
Okay, that's significant investment.
Huge. And maybe even more importantly, this incident directly led to the creation of the Cruise Passenger Bill of Rights.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that.
It wasn't just PR. It actually guarantees certain basic standards now. Things like safety, sanitation, access to medical care, timely information during emergencies, things passengers didn't really have codified rights for before.
So real tangible protections came out of it.
Definitely. It gave passengers more power, more recourse. And interestingly, the ship itself, the Carnival Triumph, it got a massive overhaul, too. $200 million refurbishment.
And they renamed it, right?
They did. It's now the Carnival Sunrise. Sailed under a new name since 2019. Kind of trying to leave the past behind, I suppose.
Wow. So yeah, from a truly terrible, infamous event to being a real catalyst for significant change, this deep dive really shows how sometimes the worst situations can force improvements.
Absolutely. If you zoom out, look at the bigger picture. The poop cruise is this stark reminder, isn't it?
Hmm.
How one crisis can just expose vulnerabilities across a whole system,
Yeah.
and how that pressure can drive essential reforms, making things ultimately safer and hopefully more transparent for you, the consumer.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Yeah, about, people's resilience in those situations,
Uh-huh.
but also how one awful event can eventually lead to better protections for everyone. It makes you wonder what other industries might need a similar kind of wake-up call.